Muy buenos días a todos los aquí presentes. Creo que hay muchos jóvenes, los cuales ponen muy contentos y sé que van a aprovechar de la conferencia que en unos minutos más van a escuchar. En primer lugar, les quiero agradecer a la Universidad Nacional de La Plata y a la Facultad de Informática por brindarnos este espacio y darnos la posibilidad de presentar hoy aquí a Bertrand Piccard. Vamos a hacer algunas recomendaciones. Les vamos a pedir si por favor pueden apagar sus teléfonos celulares, ya que resulta siempre incómodo el ruidito del teléfono cuando hay que estar en una conferencia. También la realidad que nos toca vivir hoy en día me pide que por favor prestemos especial atención sobre los efectos personales de cada uno para que no tengamos que lamentar ninguna pérdida. Habiendo dicho esto, yo le voy a pedir al señor decano de la Facultad de Informática de la Universidad Nacional de La Plata, al licenciado Javier Díaz, si se puede acercar al estrado y darnos unas palabras de bienvenida.
Bueno, buenos días a todos, bienvenidos. Quería agradecer a la Embajada de Francia haber elegido a la Facultad de Informática y a la Universidad de La Plata para realizar esta actividad. La Facultad de Informática, digamos, le da bastante importancia a las energías renovables. Tenemos un proyecto destacado por el cual tenemos 72 paneles solares, la instalación más grande de paneles solares en Argentina, con 17 kilowatt pico y un montón de datos que se pueden consultar. Y bueno, básicamente el fin de eso no es solo generar el 20% de energía del edificio, sino generar conciencia en los alumnos que cursan en la facultad. Que los alumnos vean que eso es posible, qué se puede hacer, cómo cambiar, cómo empezar a pensar en energías renovables y en la sustentabilidad del medio ambiente. Me parece eso central, creo que eso hizo que entramos en empatía con la Embajada de Suiza y el proyecto de Bertrand Piccard, y entonces en realidad creo que es una muy buena combinación que la facultad que promueve que se use la energía renovable pueda recibir con mucha alegría, digamos, este proyecto Eco Suiza y tener un orador de clase mundial como Bertrand Piccard para motivar a los chicos en este tipo de energía y este tipo de pensamiento que creemos que es el futuro. Tenemos que formar a las nuevas generaciones en este tipo de pensamiento. Así que bueno, les agradezco mucho haber elegido la Facultad de Informática, la Universidad Nacional de La Plata. Está conmigo el vicepresidente de la Universidad Nacional de La Plata, que es un defensor de todos los temas de medio ambiente, porque para toda la universidad esto es muy importante, así que quería destacar la importancia que le damos, agradecerles a la Embajada y a Bertrand Piccard que haya podido venir a visitarnos. Y bueno, vamos a todos a disfrutar de una excelente charla y una gran motivación en estos temas que son de interés para nosotros y toda la humanidad. Así que muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, señor decano, por sus palabras. Voy a pedir en esta oportunidad al embajador de Suiza, a Johannes Mathiasi, si se puede acercar al estrado también para dar unas palabras de bienvenida.
Muchas gracias, y les habló Alex Lenz, es el agregado comercial económico de la Embajada de Suiza, porque él siempre olvida de presentarse a sí mismo, porque es un poco un juego que yo le presento. Bueno, muy buenos días a todos, señor vicepresidente de la universidad, señor decano, mon cher ami Bertrand Piccard. Un honor, un privilegio darles la bienvenida en esta jornada de Eco Suiza. Y antes de explicarles un poco lo que es Eco Suiza, quiero agradecer de todo corazón la Universidad Nacional de La Plata para abrirnos las puertas. Nos sentimos ya verdaderamente en casa. Un agradecimiento muy particular al señor decano y a todo su equipo que verdaderamente hizo todo perfectamente para darnos la bienvenida aquí en este salón. Y también un gran agradecimiento a las empresas suizas que hicieron posible que podíamos invitar a Bertrand Piccard. Lo ven en los paneles y lo van a ver también algunas de esas empresas de la presentación de Bertrand Piccard. Y un agradecimiento también muy grande al equipo de la embajada que trabajó muchísimo para la realización de ese evento, y un agradecimiento muy especial a mi amigo Bertrand Piccard, porque todos nosotros tenemos sueños. Yo tenía también un sueño. Yo lo conozco desde mucho a Bertrand Piccard, trabajamos juntos. Y cuando me nombraron embajador de Suiza aquí en Argentina, lo encontré y entonces le dije: Bertrand, tienes que venir en Argentina. Y para mí era un sueño de tenerlo aquí. Y ya estoy casi por terminar mi mandato aquí en Argentina, entonces casi era el último momento que se realizó ese sueño. Entonces, merci beaucoup Bertrand d'être ici et avoir vraiment fait possible qu'un de mes rêves se réalise. Bueno, quizás algunos se preguntaron qué es EcoSuiza. Es una plataforma de diálogo, de cooperación que creamos en el año 2011 bajo forma de un proyecto piloto. Organizamos las primeras jornadas de tunelería. Y esta plataforma, la idea es cada año seleccionar un tema que entra en el gran tema de la protección del medio ambiente. Entonces, la significación de esta plataforma es establecer contactos, el diálogo sobre temas vinculados a la protección del medio ambiente. En 2011, como dije, saben que en Suiza estamos construyendo el túnel ferroviario más largo del mundo, 57 kilómetros. Lo vamos a abrir en el año 2016. 2012, la segunda edición de EcoSuiza, la temática de la construcción sustentable y la arquitectura. El año pasado, el buen uso del agua. Estuvimos también aquí en La Plata. Y entonces se nos ofreció ese año la posibilidad de tener a Bertrand Piccard. ¿Y quién podría explicar mejor, sobre la base de un proyecto concreto, lo que significan, lo que podría ser el impulso de las energías renovables? Entonces, ese año, eso es el gran tema. Creo que es un tema de actualidad en todos los países del mundo. Sabemos que los desafíos son diferentes, pero creo que a la base de todos para solucionar de esos desafíos, es siempre algo que Bertrand Piccard les va a explicar mucho mejor que yo: pensar que el imposible es posible. Y van a ver, Bertrand Piccard a través de su proyecto le va a presentar también una filosofía. ¿Se acuerdan? No se van a acordar, yo tampoco, porque todavía no viví. En el año 1927, Lindbergh hizo el trayecto en un avión de Nueva York a París. Nadie pensaba en ese momento que años después vamos a tener un Airbus 380 con más de 800 pasajeros. Entonces, pensar que el imposible es posible. Y yo estoy convencido que a través de personajes como Bertrand Piccard, que de profesión es psiquiatra, pero es piloto, aventurero, pionero y mucho más, es que nuestra sociedad va a avanzar. Necesitamos gente que toma el riesgo, que tiene el coraje de decirse: todo el mundo me dice no es posible, pero yo voy a tratar de hacerlo posible. Pero ya hablé bastante, porque Bertrand Piccard les puede mostrar y explicar mucho mejor. Pero estoy seguro que todos ustedes van a salir de ese salón y de esas jornadas y tienen algo por su propia vida. Entonces, muchísimas gracias a todos por su presencia. Nos sentimos honrados, sala lleno, y disfruten de la presentación de Bertrand Piccard. Muchísimas gracias. señor de Tabo. Muchísimas gracias por abrirse a la puerta de su casa. Y aquí un pequeño libro de Bertrand Piccard que él va después a firmar.
Muchísimas gracias, embajador, por sus palabras. Muchísimas gracias por mi presentación. Yo lo conozco al señor embajador hace más de 25 años, cuando yo era muy joven y recién empezaba a trabajar en la embajada, lo cual me dio un vínculo de amistad con él y realmente estos años poder trabajar con él fueron un placer. Muchísimas gracias, embajador. Bien, vamos a continuar con esta actividad. Ahora me toca presentarlo a Bertrand Piccard, pero no lo voy a hacer desde acá. Lo voy a hacer desde la mitad. Pero antes, como hay muchos jóvenes, voy a tomar 2 minutos para decirles que dentro de pocos minutos, yo ayer llegué a mi casa después de un día muy largo de trabajo y me quedé pensando en todo lo que vi, en todo lo que aprendí, en todo lo que me motivaron durante ese día. Pero ustedes van a ver también, hay una cosa técnica que me quedó. Nosotros los argentinos somos muchos de los autos, muchos de las carreras, jugamos en el Fangio. Y ustedes van a ver hoy el Fórmula 1 de la aviación. Y no porque vaya rápido, porque de hecho el avión no puede ir rápido, sino porque hoy en día, en los autos de Fórmula 1, en el terreno que nosotros pisamos, se van incorporando las mejoras tecnológicas que muchos años después se ven en el auto que todos nosotros manejamos. Hoy, el avión de Bertrand Piccard está incorporando nuevas tecnologías que nos van a hacer a todos un mundo mejor y muy probablemente nos va a brindar la posibilidad de una mejor movilidad. Entonces, vean esto no solamente con lo que es el avión, sino con la visión de muy largo plazo, con esa visión de que todo esto que él está emprendiendo hoy, sus hijos muy probablemente se vean beneficiados. Ese es el mensaje. Dicho esto, que es personal mío, voy a presentar a Bertrand. Bertrand nació en Suiza en el seno de una dinastía de exploradores y científicos que ha conquistado las alturas y profundidades del planeta. Bertrand Piccard es quien ha dado la primera vuelta al mundo en globo aerostático sin paradas intermedias en 1999. Asimismo, un renombrado psiquiatra internacional, aeronauta y conferencista. Embajador de buena voluntad de las Naciones Unidas, combina la ciencia y la aventura para hacer frente a algunos de los grandes desafíos de nuestro tiempo. En colaboración con André Bertrand y un equipo multidisciplinario, tuvo la idea de llevar a la realidad el sueño de construir una aeronave capaz de atravesar los cielos solo impulsada con energía solar. En 2013 cruzó Estados Unidos uniendo la costa oeste y este, desde San Francisco a Nueva York, demostrando el uso práctico de las energías limpias y renovables. En 2015, con el Solar Impulse 2, está previsto circunnavegar el hemisferio norte con solo 4 o 5 paradas en todo el recorrido. Habiéndolo presentado a Bertrand, les comento que la dinámica de esta conferencia va a ser la siguiente. Yo ahora, en un instante más, les voy a presentar un video que les va a poner en tema sobre Solar Impulse. Luego Bertrand lo vamos a recibir en su momento con un gran aplauso para comenzar su conferencia. Al final va a haber preguntas por parte del público. Las preguntas van a ser escritas, con lo cual aquellos que disponen de un papelito, a medida que se les va ocurriendo la pregunta, la pueden ir escribiendo y nos entrega al personal que se encuentra en los pasillos, de manera que luego vamos seleccionando las preguntas. Si son muchas, les pedimos disculpas, no siempre se pueden leer todas. Así que seguimos y vamos a ver la película.
Some stories have to start way back in the past. Never before has a single family conquered, explored and invented as much as the 3 Piccard generations. They have written history. But what about today? Is it still possible to write history? How can we live those same emotions again in the 21st century? What is still there to inspire the next generations? Today, Bertrand Piccard and André Boschberg have teamed up to build the first airplane of perpetual endurance, able to fly day and night without fuel, and take it around the world on solar power by 2015. A challenge considered impossible by many specialists.
In scientific exploration, I want to inspire others to also achieve the impossible, thanks to pioneering spirit.
Bertrand Piccard, explorer and psychiatrist, wants to demonstrate how new technologies and pioneering spirit can bring a significant contribution to a more sustainable world. Nowadays, the new challenges concern environment, energy, and ecology. Our world desperately needs new solutions to reduce the negative impact of human beings on the delicate balance of nature.
touches on 4 really critical areas for the department head. These are examples of the technologies that will make 10 years from now look just as different as it does when we look back 10 years and see the enormous changes that we've had.
Behind every achievement, men and women have dedicated their passion and their courage to write the most incredible pages of the history books. They have invented the future by going beyond the frontiers of certainties. They have trusted in the power of their dreams, and their visions have changed the world. In the footsteps of these great pioneers, will Bertrand Piccard and succeed in their attempt to achieve the first ever solar flight around the world? Will Solar Impulse 2 make it across continents and oceans without a single drop of fuel? Or is the challenge too high? Here again, the spirit of exploration has a role to play if we want to change the world. And you can be a part of it.
Muy bien, en el marco de Suiza 2014, con toda la pasión que lo caracteriza, les pido que con un gran aplauso reciban a Bertrand Piccard.
Bon dia. Good morning to everybody. Now it's the English lesson, not only renewable energy. What is so special about that airplane? You see that it is flying day and night with no fuel. And the technologies that allow this airplane to remain in the air and maybe one day to fly around the world on solar power, all the technologies exist and would be available also in everyday's life for cars, for houses, for lighting systems, for heating or cooling, for everything. And you know, if these technologies were used everywhere in the world, we could already today divide by 2 the energy consumption of the world. And we could provide half of the needs with renewable sources. Why don't we do it? The technologies exist. Why don't we do it? Well, probably just because of the lack of pioneering spirit. Because people are afraid of changes. People are stuck into their certitudes, into their habits. And usually people prefer to reassure themselves to the past rather than to embrace change for the future. I believe that what we have to understand is that life is a little bit like the atmosphere. In life, there are winds that blow everywhere. The trends, the fashions, the expectation of other people, the political decisions, the financial markets, globalization, but also on a more personal level, everything like health, accidents, sicknesses, love, failure, success, crisis, all this is exactly like the winds. It comes in our life as a surprise, without being planned, and it pushes us toward the unknown. And the problem is that we do not learn to prepare ourselves for the unknown. We prepare ourselves for certainty. We prepare ourselves for paradigms, for dogmas, for habits, for knowledge, which is good also. But we don't learn to prepare ourselves for the uncertainty of life. So we try to fight against the changes. We try to fight against life against the winds of life. And we try to have the most possible power, the most possible control. We try to fight against the obstacles with the highest possible speed. Sometimes it works, but so often we miss the opportunities. So often we do not bring the innovation in our life that would allow us to live better, to have a more interesting life, to change what needs to be changed in the world. If I love ballooning, it's because in a balloon you learn to do exactly the opposite from everything I told you now. In the balloon you learn to have no power because you have no engine. You learn to have no control because you are pushed by the wind in the direction of the wind toward the unknown. So in a sense, the balloon flight is a permanent crisis management. You know exactly where you come from, but you have absolutely no idea where you go to. So people can believe that ballooning is useless. Well, ballooning is a really interesting lesson for life. Because you learn something in ballooning. Is that if you want to change your direction, you have to change your altitude. Because the different levels of wind all have a different direction. So if you want to go left or right, you need to move up and down. And this is what we should learn to do in life. Because in life, we are pushed by the winds like the balloon. We have dreams, hopes, visions, targets. But so often the winds of life don't allow us to reach them. And then we are lost because we don't know what to do. Because we tend to fight horizontally. We have a life in 2 dimensions instead of having a life in 3 dimensions. In life also, we can learn how to change altitude. Changing altitude in our education. This is exactly what you are doing here. It's a big adventure. It's a sacrifice also to study. Changing altitude in the education. Changing altitude in our relation with other people. Changing altitude in our psychological, philosophical, or even spiritual understanding of life and the world. In order to reach other altitudes, other influences, other streams, other currents, other solutions, other strategies, other answers that will necessarily reorient our life in a different way. But if I would stop here, you would think, why is the Swiss embassy inviting a balloonist to say that we have to change altitude in the winds of life to have a better vision of the world? Well, it would be, at the most, a poetic metaphor, but completely useless. So let's try to make it practical, really practical. And for this, you have to understand how a balloon works. If you want to change altitude in your balloon, you actually have to drop ballast. You have to drop weight. During our flight around the world, we have to drop all our active fuel tanks. If possible, over unpopulated areas. We have to drop bags of sand, reserves of water, even reserves of food. We have to throw that overboard in order to be able to climb and go through the different layers of wind, and then we would catch the good one in order to have a good direction. This is what we should be able to learn to do also in our daily life. Because we have a lot of ballast in life. What do we have as ballast? We have safety, certitudes, convictions, exclamation marks, beliefs, common assumptions, paradigms, dogmas. You know, all these things that we learn to keep on board. We learn to hold all this in our hands very strongly. And when something goes bad and we get into a crisis, have you noticed that the first thing we learn is to stick to what we already know? How can we solve a new problem with an old solution? It doesn't work. We need to throw a lot of certitudes overboard if we want to be able to change altitude and find other directions in life. And this is something that can be very practical. Each each time you need to be innovative, creative. Each time you need to solve a crisis or get solutions for a new situation. You need to be honest enough to really observe what you deeply believe and try something else. Maybe it's the sentence you should remember from that speech. There will be other sentences, but this one I think is really useful. If you want to do better in your life, be honest, observe what you believe, your convictions, your certitudes, and try something else. Like this, you can be free. I'm not saying that the something else will always be better. No, it would be stupid to say that. What I mean is that usually we are a prisoner of one way of thinking. We're a prisoner of one line. Each one has his own line. And then when two lines cross, it's a fight. Because each one believes that his line and his way of thinking is better. So instead of being prisoner of one way to do, imagine you envisage, you try maybe, the opposite. It is not just one new idea you get. No, it is thousands of possibilities in between. Thousands of options. Thousands of other answers. And then you can choose the one that will help you for your life. And if we do that, the future is going to be like a firework. We will never be prisoner of the same dimension. We will be at every moment in front of all the possibilities, at every altitude, in 3 dimensions. And this is freedom. Because freedom is not when you can do everything you want. Freedom is when you can think everything you want. And I believe that no key decision maker, no opinion leader, no CEO, professor, no one in life can do his job correctly if he is only thinking what he has learned. We need to be able to envisage the opposite. In politics, you really believe something in politics? Try to see the world in another way. You really believe something in religion? Try to understand what another religion would think. You believe something in technology? Try to imagine what people in 200 years will believe of that. And then you will understand that the reality that we build is not the single reality in the world. Each person has one reality. And what we need to do is to be able to navigate on this vertical axis, like in the balloon. Change altitude. Try every way to think, every way to act, every way to behave. Until you find the way to get to the altitude where the line brings you in the direction you wish in your life. This is called pioneering spirit. It's called exploration. It's called creativity. It's called innovation. It's called entrepreneurship, crisis management. All these words are the same. They just mean that we go ballast to the board, to change altitude and find a better way in life. But what is clear is that when you try different altitudes, when you try different behaviors, different ways to think, you don't always know which one is the best. And sometimes you fail. When I was trying to fly around the world in a balloon, the first flight was a major disaster. You know, I gave a press conference. There were 170 journalists, and I said that I would fly around the world non-stop in a balloon, in the jet streams, 2 weeks flight non-stop. After 6 hours, I was down in the water. Technical problem, and we had to stop the flight. It's not a funny moment. I tell you, I was crying like a kid on that failure. But there are a lot of interesting learnings. The first learning is to observe how many people are relieved when you fail. You know, all the people who build protections for their certitudes, They hate you when you succeed, because you're a threat for them. You're a threat for their habits. So if you want to be loved by everybody, fail. People will love you. So of course, if you stop at that moment, it's a failure. If you try one more time, it may be a step to success. And what is success? Success is when you try one more time and a number of failures. So of course, we tried again. Second balloon, second attempt, second failure. Why? Well, because the Chinese government had given no permission to fly above China, and the winds did not know it. There was a very strong wind that could push the balloon to China, but we were not allowed to take it, so we tried to go around China, and the winds were too weak, we did not have enough gas, and we landed in Myanmar, in Burma. Second failure. But then we had to do exactly what I explained you before. We put the team together, and we tried to really analyze, study what was the paradigm of our strategy. And for us, as for all the other teams who wanted to be the first to fly around the world, there were about 10 teams competing together on a big international race. For all of us, there was the same paradigm. We wanted to build the most stable balloon. So we could take off below a jet stream, climb to 10,000 meters, and then doing nothing, just wait until the balloon would go around the world. It was completely stupid. Because if you have an obstacle, meteorological like a thunderstorm, political like China, you cannot go around. You have to stop, you have to land. And this is what happened to everybody trying to go around the world. So we needed to do the opposite. We needed to build a balloon that was the most unstable balloon as possible. So this balloon could go up and down all the time in the atmosphere, and then we would actively stabilize it at the right altitude to take the good winds. So although we had explained to the media, to the public, to the sponsors, why we had the best strategy, we had to say that it was wrong. And we built a third balloon. We built another capsule, another type of burners, another type of fuel. We had another envelope who was built with a much better insulation, so the balloon could go up and down without losing any gas. And the result is that at the end, we have the best balloon ever built in the history of aviation, just because it was built like every human being should be built. That means with the ability to live in three dimensions, to go up and down, to find the best ways. When I explain it like this, it seems obvious. But can you imagine that none of our competitors understood that they had to change their strategy? And we had really big competitors. We had billionaires from North America, from Australia, from Europe. They were sure they would make it, and not a small team like mine, coming from a small country like Switzerland. So they tried also, like me. They failed, like me. They tried again, because they have the same perseverance. But the big difference is that they always tried over and over exactly the same way, with the same wrong technologies and the same wrong strategies. And for each failure of each team, there was always exactly the same explanation. And after my success with Brian Jones, when we could do it successfully around the world and stuff, there was a big ceremony, big press conference, and the first question of the first journalist took me by surprise. I thought I would be asked to speak about the beauty of being pushed by the wind over all the continents and the ocean of the planet, something a bit philosophical. Not at all. The guy was a good financial press journalist, and he said, can you explain me how you could beat these big billionaires with your small team coming from a small country like Switzerland? And I had 2 seconds to find an answer. And in these moments, you need to check every altitude, every possibility, you know, and those very fast to open. Unfortunately, I remembered an observation that I had made with my children in my house in Switzerland. In this house, there is a covered terrace. One side is a wall of the house. Two sides are made out of squares of glass in a wooden frame that you cannot open. And one side is always open to the garden. You cannot close it. And nevertheless, every day in summer, there are some dead bees on the floor. And I could not understand why these bees could not escape from the terrace. So when I started to study a little bit that phenomenon, I saw that each time the bee was flying in the wrong direction, it would crash against the piece of glass. And for hours or days, that bee would be on the single piece of glass trying to fight its way through the obstacle. And of course, at the end, it was dying. I found it dry and dead on the floor. But there was never any single wasp who was dead on the floor. And I started to observe that, and I saw that when there was a wasp flying in the wrong direction, crashing on a piece of glass, the wasp will always try one square of glass after the other. Never any focus on the problem. Try every possible solution until it could find the exit and escape. So when I saw that, I took my children, I brought them at this place of the house, in the terrace, and I showed them and explained them the difference between the stupid and stubborn bee who is unable to change altitude, unable to change strategy, and the clever and perseverant wasp who is always able to adapt to another way to survive and to succeed. So that long story, just to tell you which was the answer I gave at the press conference. It was not so polite, what I said. I know the story afterward, but I think nobody understood anyway. I just said, in my team we have the strategy of the wasp, and our competitors have the strategy of the bee. Now, of course, how do you make the strategy of the wasp? You cannot be alone. Because if you're alone, very often you act as the bee. Very often you are stuck in the problem and you think you are right. But if you have a team, if you have a family, if you have friends, if you have colleagues, if you have advisors, if you have good teachers, then you can challenge your certitudes, and you will always have someone around you who will say, hey, change altitude a bit, your altitude is wrong. And then you have to check, test, and this is the adventure of life. But of course, sometimes we find ourselves with a bit of fear, because we don't have the benchmark. We don't have all the paradigms ready for the explanations. So instead of having wrong explanations that reassure us in a false way, sometimes, like when we were on the Pacific, I tell you we have moments of fear. When we had 12,000 kilometers of water between China and California, very slow winds, we thought maybe we would never get on the other side because the reserves of fuel would be out, would be over. And we have to ditch in 10-meter waves and wait for a week to get a ship to rescue us. And there were moments of fear, that's for sure. But you know, fear is something very useful in life. Fear is the signal that shows us that we are out of our zone of comfort. It means that people who are never afraid are dangerous people. There are people who don't try anything else outside of their zone of comfort. Never follow somebody who is never afraid, it's dangerous. Somebody who has doubts, somebody who can be frightened by the situation, is somebody who understands the situation and knows that he needs new solutions to succeed, new altitude, throw ballast to the wall. And this is how you can succeed in life. You know, when you have a crisis, like we have on the Pacific, if you accept the crisis, it becomes an adventure. This is is how we managed to succeed. 20 days non-stop in the air, 45,000 kilometers non-stop, and here we were. But if I show you this picture, it's not because of our smile and elation to have won. No, it's because this picture actually is not the last picture of the balloon flight around the world, it's the first picture of solar impulse, of the solar project. Why that? Well, it was interesting to see that for 6 years of my life, I had the goal to succeed. And when I was in the success, I realized that the success is only interesting if you use it to do something else. You can focus on your exams to be graduated. But as soon as you're graduated, don't sit in your armchair and say, wow, I have a diploma, I'm graduate, I'm successful. No, your diploma will help you to do something better later on. And what you do later on that is better will allow you to have even better afterward. So it's a constant evolution. And I started to have another dream 5 minutes later. Why that? Well, because we took off with 3.7 tons of liquid propane, 3,700 kilos in the fuel tanks. When we landed with Brian Jones, we had 40 kilos left. 40 kilos. That was 2 hours of flight after 20 days. So when we think about fossil energy in our world, it's a concept. You know, people tell you we have oil, gas, coal for 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years, 200 years. Nobody knows what everybody sees. It's a concept. When you have 2 more hours of flight in your fuel tanks, it's not a concept, it's a feeling in your guts. You know, in 2 hours we will fall down from the sky. And then I started to think, how could we be independent from fossil energy? For the entire flight, I was afraid that the winds would be too slow and we would not reach our success because we could be out of gas. We were limited. We had no freedom. We were slaves of the fuel. I started to think, how can we fly forever? No fuel. Fly forever. Be free. And I started to dream of that. Crazy dream. I didn't dare to talk to a lot of people about it. But it became a real project when the capsule of my balloon was brought to the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum in Washington, together with the capsule of Apollo 11, the airplanes of the Wright brothers, Charles Lindbergh, Chuck Yeager, and I started to dream of having a solar-powered airplane in that museum to show that actually aviation and exploration and adventure can continue, but on another basis. Other type of energy, no fuel. And I started to think about what is exploration, what is innovation, how the story can continue. And I noticed that there is always a big misunderstanding when we speak about exploration and adventure. Because people believe that all these successful pioneers were people who had a new idea. Not at all. You know, landing on the moon, walking on the top of the highest mountains, flying in the sky. They were dreams of humankind for thousands of years. For thousands of years. Why did they happen only in the 20th century? You will answer probably because of technology. I don't think so. Yes, for the moon landing, of course. But not to climbing the highest mountains or to fly in the sky. This first airplane here was built out of wood and cloth. It means that the Egyptians, 5,000 years ago, could have flown. They could have taken an airplane to the top of the pyramids and fly down. If only they had believed it was allowed by the mythology, by the gods. But in those days it was prohibited to fly because only the gods could fly. It was not allowed to climb on the highest mountains. The highest mountains were holy mountains, reserved for gods to live. Nobody dared to destroy the gods. Until suddenly, in the 20th century, all this mythology was turned down, And people said, we're going to fly. We're going to climb the mountains. And in 66 years, you have the first airplane, the North Pole, the South Pole, the Everest Mountain, the Marianas Trench, and the moon. Which shows that innovation is not a new idea. Innovation is an old habit, an old belief you throw overboard. Remember that. Innovation is not a new idea. Innovation is an old belief that you throw overboard. And then you can be free to create. So it's very, very good to do science. It's very good to do technology. But the mindset will allow you to invent something new or just to use what others have done in the past. If I show you here this picture of a muscular powered airplane, an airplane that flies with the force of the muscles, it's because of an interesting anecdote I lived when I was a child. A very high-level scientist explained to me why it would always be impossible to fly on muscular power. He had compared the shoulder of a human being with the wing of a bird and came to the conclusion there was not enough muscles in the human body to carry his own weight in the sky. Because the paradigm was, when you fly with the arms. Well, the guy who flew on a muscular powered airplane did not use his arms, he used his legs, pedaling to turn the propeller. And here you have enough muscular power. So you see that each time you have certitude, you need to change the altitude, you need to change the angle of view to find the new solutions, change the paradigm. This is why I thought that pioneering spirit must go on, but much more as a way to think than a way to do. Exploration and adventure has conquered the planet in the last century. All the continents, even the moon. Now, pioneering spirit should be able to conquer the quality of life on this planet, which is not yet acceptable. We need to find new solutions for human rights, for fighting poverty, eradicating poverty, for medical research, for global health, for renewable energies, for sustainable development, for saving natural resources of our planet. And these are the most important challenges that we can do as a pioneer. And for this, I tell you, there is enough space for everybody. There were only 2 people who went on the rockets to land on the moon. But for these type of challenges for quality of life, you can be millions of people working on it, and this is absolutely what we need. So I thought that if a solar-powered airplane could fly with no fuel at all, it would be one way to link this search for quality of life to the quest of adventure, pioneering technology. Because for a very long time, in the last 50 years, the protection of the environment was boring and expensive. What were the solutions to protect the environment? Less mobility, less comfort, less industry, less consumption, less growth. You would never motivate people to do less. You need to motivate people to do better, not less. And maybe not more, but better. So today we have clean technologies that can solve the problem. Clean technologies that will at the same time reduce energy consumption, protect nature, protect the raw materials and natural resources, and create jobs, open new markets, make profit, sustain growth of the industry. And all these clean technologies, usually they are in labs, invented by sometimes students in universities or startup companies, but so little of them really come globally in the world. You know, when you have solar panels on your university, it's an attraction. People come and see it. It should be everywhere, but it's not. So one way to speak about that, one way to promote it, would be to have a solar-powered airplane that could fly day and night. But you will tell me, Nothing new with solar airplanes. We have solar airplanes since 35 years, 33 years. Well, it's true that solar airplanes were already flying in the past, but they have no storage capability. They have no batteries. So when the sun was going down and there was a cloud, they had to land or to crash. It almost demonstrated the limits of the new technologies rather than the potential. So if you want to show the potential, you need to fly day and night. You need to store enough energy when you fly during daylight to use this energy during the night and reach the next sunrise and continue your flight. We knew that with a remote control model it was possible. But remote control, small wingspan, 4-meter wingspan, 25 grams of payload, it means you just have the camera inside and the pilot is on the ground. For me, it's an interesting technology, but it's not a human adventure. I wanted a pilot inside. And to have a pilot inside, it is not 4-meter wingspan, it is 64-meter wingspan. You need the minimum size of an Airbus 340 in wingspan, because you need a big aspect ratio to reduce the induced drag, and at the same time have the surface for the solar cells. But you are not allowed to build this airplane more heavy than a small car. If it is more than 1,600 kilos, it will be too heavy, and the sink rate will need to be compensated by more energy, and the batteries will be empty before the end of the night. So those were the parameters I received from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, who accepted to run a feasibility study for this project. And they were very clever. Instead of giving the lead of the feasibility study to one of the labs, because there were 14 labs included in that study, they took somebody from the outside, an engineer, entrepreneur, former jet fighter pilot, called Bertrand, that you've seen in the film. André has a completely different background than mine. And we very quickly understood that if we wanted to achieve something that was considered to be impossible, we needed to stimulate our creativity because of our differences. You know, it's like in a battery, you have a positive and a negative pole. If you have both poles with the same polarity, it's called a flat battery and you throw it to recycle. Human beings are the same. You need difference of potential. If you have an engineer, jet fighter pilot, with a psychiatrist, explorer, and balloonist, you cover the entire scope of life. But of course, you need to accept your difference. Because very often when people fight together, you destroy creativity. It's 1 and 1 equals 0. So you're afraid of the differences, so you choose your friend, your colleague, your employee, your husband, or your wife by being similar. And this is 1 and 1 equals 1. No creativity. You need to create 1 and 1 equals 3. André, me, and both of us. And both of us, that's a combination of both experiences to make a third experience. And here we started to be creative enough to work in the project. André was responsible of putting the technical team together. I was responsible of getting the partners for the funding to spread this philosophical message about the promotion of renewable energies and technologies. And for the first years, we had the engineers starting to make the concept of a new airplane. And when we were ready to build it, we had a plastic model, we had all the drawings. We thought that the aviation industry would love to subcontract the construction. Not at all. Exactly, none at all. Because they knew it was impossible. So we had to find people who did not know it was impossible. And we found a shipyard. The shipyard who built the hulls of the Allié boats who won the America's Cup. You know, Switzerland won twice the America's Cup without having any sea. So these guys, they knew how to make boats. But they did not know how to make airplanes. And they knew how to use carbon fiber. So here also with our engineers, who knew how to make airplanes but not in carbon fiber, we had 1 and 1 equals 3. And we started to receive all the major pieces That's the fuselage. 50 kilos. The entire fuselage of the plane in carbon fiber, with new technologies of construction. The entire structure in carbon fiber, if you compare proportionally in size to the best competition glider, sailplane of today, it is 10 times lighter. So here you understand why so many people thought it was impossible. And all the airplane industry thought it was impossible. And all the people specialized in energy didn't think we would make it. But at the end we had an airplane. We had an airplane on the ground, ready to fly, with these huge wings that made everybody think it could never hold itself, it could break. And I started to remember some of the Walt Disney cartoons I was watching when I was a child. And maybe you remember the story of Dumbo. This poor little elephant who had ears so big that people were laughing at him. Until he could fly with his ears. Deploying the ears, he became the first elephant ever to fly. Well, it's what we needed to do with soaring calls. Deploy these gigantic wings and show it could stay in the air day and night with no fuel. This is the flight that you've seen in the film. It was all him in that flight. And for the entire day, the sun could give enough energy to run 4 electrical motors, store the energy in the batteries, and bring the plane to 9,000 meters altitude, and ignite in the air. So you see that if the plane is too heavy, or the energy is badly managed, we crash before the end of the night. And in our world today, if we don't manage to put on the market the clean technologies, the renewable energies, if we don't manage to have enough pioneering spirit to make a sustainable future, we will never give the planet to the next generation without a major crash. So this project is really an encouragement for people to do in their life what we're doing with this project. Try to have the pioneering spirit we need to change our paradigm for the future. So it has been a huge success. The plane made it through the night. We had enough batteries to stay in the air some more, starting loading again. So theoretically we could have flown perpetually. And after that we went to across Europe. We flew to Morocco with this airplane, and then we thought, okay, now we are ready to plan the flight around the world. But the flight around the world needs an airplane that allows the pilot to travel. The first airplane has a small cockpit, no toilets, no autopilot, and we needed all that. So we started to build a new airplane, 72-meter wingspan to carry more payload. And of course, we needed to test every piece of it. And here you see the test of the wing spar. It's like the spine of the wing. And on top of this spar, you have all the ribs, and you glue the solid stuff. And André Borschberg was always joking, saying, if the piece does not break in the test, maybe it's too heavy. And the plane needs to be as light as possible. Well, in this case, it was not too heavy, it was too light. Too light and it broke. It was an explosion and that piece just blew up. And this is not a little piece. This is months to build, with dozens of people working on it. And because of the mistake of making it too light, we had to make a new one. But the new one, this was 1 more year for the project before we could fly around the world. A lot of money involved, potentially loss of confidence in the engineers, and it was a big crisis, I tell you. But each time we are in a crisis, we have to remember the different altitudes we can take. I don't know if you have been taught about the way to write the word crisis in Chinese. Very interesting teaching. It's 2 ideograms together to say crisis. But individually, the one on the left means danger, risk, something you want to avoid. And the ideogram on the right means an opportunity, the action you can undertake. So, of course, if you are not a pioneer, you take the diagram on the left, you are in the disaster, you are depressed, finish everything. Pioneer, you try to take the one on the right. And you try to find which opportunity you could do thanks to the crisis. And for us it was very clear. We had one more year. Technical team had to rebuild the piece, but the operational and mission team was free. We could do a big operation in flight. And we decided to bring the airplane to the United States and to cross America. San Francisco to New York, which is one of the iconic flights in the history of aviation in America. And it was the most successful mission that we have done with soaring calls, touching billions of people through the media. We had 8.5 billion media impressions to speak about renewable energy, about clean technologies. We could touch a lot of politicians and media, because it could be André flying the plane, could be me flying the plane. Each time, of course, it attracts a lot of people. If you make a press conference to explain the advantage of solar power, nobody comes. But if you arrive with a solar powered airplane, you have 150 kilometers at the landing, and then you can spread your message. Then you can explain how you can do with renewable energies, with clean technologies for the future. But not only for the future, for today, to create jobs, to make profit for the industry. And probably the climax of this success, after meeting a lot of American politicians, was to be received at the United Nations headquarters by Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General, and to put forces together to try to encourage more ambitious energy policies in every country. Because this is actually what we need. You can have people inventing new technologies if the governments are not pushing to put them on the market. If the governments are not making the incentive to have people using these technologies, no change will come. So it's clear that pushing the governments to take a legal frame where it will be encouraged to save energy, to use these technologies is vital. Vital. But of course, on the individual point of view, it's vital also to be a pioneer. And each time I was meeting people from the public, supporters, fans of this project who came to see the airplane, I was always very moved because nobody came to congratulate us, everybody came to thank us. And they I did not know why they were thanking us. These people were saying, we have a world with bad governance, with problems, with crises, with difficulties, and there is no hope. But when you come with this airplane, it brings solutions, it brings hope, it allows us to dream, and we'd like to thank you for that. And for me, it became so obvious that we live in this planet like on these two pictures here. You know these two pictures are the first one and the last one I did during the balloon flight around the world. The first one, crystal clear view, perfect visibility, very good publicity, by the way, for Switzerland because you see the Matterhorn. But it makes the impression that life can be easy. You have the future open. But it's not like that very often. Most of the time it's like on the other picture. On the other picture, you have moisture that make the condensation and froze on the window, big ice crystals on the window. And you hardly see on the other side the sunrise. And this is very often what happens in life. We don't see the future. We don't see how it's going to happen. We have doubts, we have uncertainty, we have fears. And there is one thing we have to avoid. We have to avoid to think that it is better to suffer in the ice we know rather than take the risk of going through the ice to see what there is on the other side. We have to take that risk. And if people don't have the courage, or maybe the knowledge, or maybe the strength to do it, you have to help them. Pioneering is not something individual. Pioneering is something to help the others to become pioneers also. Help to give the strength and the courage and the hope to go through the eyes of the future to see what there is on the other side. This is the greatest adventure of all. People can go on the moon, dive in the oceans, fly in a solar power airplane. At the end, the most important adventure is to go in our life, day by day, trying to change altitude, drop ballast, find better ways, and be fulfilled. Fulfillment is more important than success. And that's what I wish to all of you. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Bertrand. Merecido el aplauso. These applausos for you. Muy bueno, realmente emocionante. Vamos a continuar con las preguntas. Yo no sé si hay preguntas ya que alguien haya pasado a la gente. Si alguien tiene algún papelito y me lo quiere acercar inmediatamente, acá están llegando. Tal vez le voy a pedir a Isabel si me puede ayudar con alguna de las preguntas. Llegó la pregunta. Y está en inglés. Many students and teachers of aeronautical engineering are here today who would like to know technical details of solar inputs, LD ratio, engines, batteries, what difficulties to overcome, etc.
Yes? So, in order to make it fly with no fuel, the problem is not so much to produce the energy, rather than to save the energy. So in order to be energy efficient, we have what is probably today the best electrical motors. It's brushless, sensorless motors with a mechanical gear to turn the propeller 10 times slower than the motor. And we have 94% efficiency, including the gear. So you imagine how efficient it is. Without the gear, it's about 97% efficiency. Unbelievable. The batteries, lithium polymer batteries, we have 260 watt-hours per kilo. But this was possible because our partners like Solvay and Biometal Science changed the electrolyte of the COCAM batteries in Korea, changed the electrode to carbon nanotubes, and thanks to that, the battery for the same weight can hold more energy. This had to be fully tested. We had Omega, the watch company, who provided the test bench in order to have the most efficient optimization of energy. Then everything else has to be optimized. You saw the film, the lighting systems. We have 16 landing lights. When we fly at night, people call the police, they think it's a UFO. Flying saucer. And all together, these 16 lamps, they need 150 watts. Like 2 lamps of a bedroom. And all this plane is optimized like this. The carbon structure, we are working now with layers of carbon which are 25 grams per square meter. Just to give you an example, a piece of paper from the printer is 80 grams per square meter. It is 3 times heavier. So all these are new technologies that allow to be lighter, to be more efficient, and it's clear that we will not have solar-powered airplanes very soon to transport 200 passengers. If you're aeronautical engineers, and I will tell you, oh, next year we transport 100 people, you will know I will lie, because it's today not possible. But today it's possible to open the door. and to do what actually Charles Lindbergh has done. When Charles Lindbergh was flying across the Atlantic, he was alone on board. Why? Because all the payload was fuel. We are starting a new cycle now in aviation. We are alone on board because all the payload is batteries. And we just have to see in the future what will happen. Probably in 5-10 years' time, you will have electrical airplanes flying with no fuel, just electricity, with batteries, maybe some solar cells, with 4 or 5 people on board. This is what we can imagine. To fly Sunday afternoon around the airports, you know, in the air club, making no noise, neighbors will love you. This is the near future. Now the far future, I don't know. But you'll have to make it happen. You're younger than me. Maybe if you fly once in a solar-powered airplane as a passenger, maybe you will have contributed to make it. I'll be too old to see that, but you'll see it.
Muchas gracias, Bertrand. Acá hay una pregunta que además de una pregunta es una sugerencia, con lo cual tenganla presente por si sucede. La pregunta dice: ¿no han pensado en la posibilidad de agregar helio en las cavidades muertas, entiendo las cavidades muertas del avión, para alivianar peso?
Everything that flies is not really good. I have a lot of mosquitoes. Helium, let's say 1 cubic meter of helium will lift 1 kilo at sea level. If you are at 11,000 meters altitude, 1 cubic meter of helium will lift 250 grams. To make the inside of the wings of the airplane helium tight, you need a lot of kilos of material, which will be heavier than the lift you get. So we had to renounce. But you are absolutely right to ask the question, because when you do something impossible, you have to envisage all the options, everything, even the most crazy ideas. You have to envisage. And then you check if it works or not. And helium doesn't work. What also does not work is at night to use the propellers as a generator. Because you could potentially, during the night, lie down, have the propeller turning backward to fill up the batteries. But what will happen? It will happen that you create more drag than the benefit. So finally, you will increase your sink rate so much that the benefit of energy you gain will be negative. So we better not do it. We better have the propellers turning at the same speed that when you go forward. So we put about 100 watts in every motor just to have propellers turning with the wind and of course not creating any drag.
Tenemos una pregunta más, que en este caso son dos preguntas. Dice: ¿hay un límite para la cantidad de energía solar aprovechable? La repregunta Bertrand, en este caso, a la pregunta si hay un límite para la cantidad de energía solar aprovechable. ¿En qué sentido? No sé quién la hizo, si se quiere poner de pie. Adelante. ¿Vos te referís a la cantidad de irradiación que cae sobre los paneles que puede ser aprovechable?
So you have roughly 1,000 watts per square meter at sea level available. The efficiency of the solar cells we have is 23%. So you have 230 watts remaining. And then it goes through the cables, it goes to the batteries. The batteries are 99 point something efficiency, motor is 94, propeller, you're losing a little bit to the propeller also. So at the end you see that you don't have a lot of energy left. So you have really to take the advantage of every gram and every watt. So it means also that if the night is too long, you don't make it through the night. You need to fly between, I would say, April and August or September in order to be able to make it through the night. if you fly in winter, well, winter for the North Hemisphere, but for you, we can fly during the day, but at 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock at night, we have empty batteries we have to land.
La segunda pregunta de la misma persona, si han intentado mejorar radicalmente la tecnología de paneles solares.
No, because this involves budgets that we don't have, labs that we don't have. What we could improve was the thickness. We managed to get from SunPower in the US solar cells that are 135 microns, which is extremely thin, and this helped us to be lighter. But these solar cells you can get. It's mainly to get more efficiency if you have a small surface. Now, if you have a huge surface available, then you can take cheaper panels that have a lower efficiency.
Yo le voy a hacer una pregunta en función de lo que acaba de explicar. En este sentido significa que los paneles solares que usaron están en el mercado disponible, se ha mejorado simplemente el grosor.
Yes.
Son paneles que están en el mercado disponibles para cualquiera.
But we improved the batteries enormously. And now the batteries from Cocan will be available on the market with 260 watt-hours kilo instead of 160. That was what we had available when we started the project.
Tengo una pregunta más, la vamos a guardar para un poquito más adelante porque me parece muy buena. Yo tengo una pregunta práctica que le quiero hacer con respecto a Solar Impulse 2. Es algo muy sencillo. Ustedes vuelan 26 horas en el avión aproximadamente. ¿Cómo es la vida dentro de ese avión?
Well, on the first airplane it was 26 hours maximum because the plane could do more but not the pilot. No toilet, no resting, nothing. In the second airplane, for the flight around the world, some of the flights will be 5 to 6 days. The Pacific, the Atlantic, is going to be 5 to 6 days. Then the plane will land and will change the pilot for the next day. But 5 to 6 days on board is going to be a fabulous adventure. And actually you can follow it. When we will be flying, it's going to be transmitted live. We can organize with your university some connections with the pilot. You can ask pictures to Andre or to me when we're going to be there for days in the sky. And I will tell you how we will feel. I don't know yet.
Una pregunta más, está en inglés. In your opinion, as an explorer, what or which is the last frontier for mankind? I expect you're asking in the sense of aeronautical or ¿cuál es para él en el sentido? Gracias.
Well, there are a lot of frontiers in aeronautics that everybody would like to push back. People would like to go on Mars, that's for sure. After the moon, people would like to go on Mars. People would like to be able to get free from gravity. I don't know if somebody will ever succeed. If you can make some ways that will counteract gravity, you can fly with less energy. That's for crazy future. One thing that will happen probably within the next 20 years is to make suborbital transportation. You take off from Argentina, you just need energy to go to 100 kilometers. And then you make a parabolic flight that arrives in Australia, arrives in Europe, arrives in Russia, China, and it can go half the way around the world in 40 minutes. So you'll probably be sick during 40 minutes. Because you have zero gravity, you're going to throw up for 40 minutes. But maybe it's better to throw up 40 minutes than to be stuck in an airplane for 20 hours.
Vamos a ir cerrando con las últimas dos preguntas. Tenemos una que dice, Usted habló de decisiones políticas. Muchos países se niegan o postergan decisiones para reducir emisiones. ¿Qué apoyo obtiene de estos países o cómo piensa que pueden colaborar, sobre todo porque muchas empresas multinacionales presionan políticamente?
When we speak about climate change and CO2 in the big international conferences, what do we hear? We hear everybody who says it's a big problem, we need a lot of money to solve it, and we don't know where to find the money. And you will never motivate anybody if you speak of a big expensive problem. You know, I'm a medical doctor originally. What I always learn is that the problem is called a symptom. The symptom has an origin, diagnosis, and when you have the diagnosis, you put the treatment. For CO2 it's the same. Stop to think that CO2 is the problem. CO2 is a symptom that only comes from the problem of burning too much oil, too much coal, too much gas. And here there is a therapy. The therapy is called new technologies. You can implement technologies that save energy, reduce the energy consumption. You can divide by 3 the consumption of a car. You can divide by 10 the consumption of a house with better insulation, heat pumps, solar cells. You can reduce your CO2 in every factory of the world, having a better return on investment than putting your equities on the stock exchange market. So suddenly, you don't have an expensive problem. You have thousands of profitable solutions. And this is what the world has to speak about. This is what you have to say in the international conferences. And this is the message of Solar Impulse. And each time we come and meet political people, we don't say we're here to protect the environment. I'm saying we're here to protect the economy and the job creation, thanks to these new technologies that the world so badly needs. And then people start to listen. And then you have industries who listen. Then you have political decision makers who listen. And sometimes in Switzerland, I even change the votes of the Senate, the Parliament, by bringing this type of argument. People understand that it's a fabulous opportunity to take. And the consequence will be less CO2. But don't focus on the symptom. Focus on the diagnosis and the treatment.
Vamos a hacer la última pregunta. Es una pregunta muy cortita, está en inglés, y la pregunta dice: ¿cómo te podemos ayudar?
Well, that's a really nice question. You can speak of Solar Impulse as much as you can and spread this message. In this way, you don't only help me, you help yourself. You help your country, you help humankind. So, what can you do? Now, with social networks, you can do a lot of things. With Twitter, with Facebook. You can follow, for example, all the messages that we have on our website or our social media communication. You go on the @Solar Impulse or @Bertrand Piccard. You go on our Facebook page, website, 3xW-solarimpulse.com. And you retweet, you post blogs, you transmit this message everywhere around you to other people. And this is what we need. We need more people who understand what it's about. And then, of course, if you know journalists, ask them to write articles about that. If you know political people, candidates, local, national candidates, you can approach them. Go to tell them about the solutions, not the problems. The problems, they're aware of it. Speak about the solutions. And contribute to make a network that will spread this type of pioneering philosophy. Like this, we all help each other.
Con esto terminamos. Creo que se merece nuevamente un gran aplauso. Muy bien, estamos todos inspirados luego de esta magnífica presentación. Nosotros vamos a continuar con Ecosisa 2014. Ahora vamos a hacer un break y luego, una vez que tengamos armado nuevamente acá, vamos a continuar con un panel donde algunos expertos vamos a debatir al respecto de nuestra realidad cotidiana de las energías y las energías renovables. Los esperamos a todos en unos minutos más. Muchas gracias.